November 13th. This is our cabinet meeting. We have a handful of things that we need to talk about today. If you look at the agenda, and I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to look through that, maybe jot down some questions about what stands out to you. And the biggest thing I want you guys to look at is on the second page, we have board voting. And as we go through my superintendent updates, our district concerns, the board voting, what we need to determine today is what do we want to take to the board out of this? And what do we want them to vote on? We want them to vote in the direction that we want to go. So if we're not ready or prepared to take something to the board, then let's table that until we are prepared. And that you may have to take some stuff back to your teams. You may have to dig back into some of the research. And if there is certain things we can take to the board sooner than later, then I would like to discuss those also. When we get done with that, we need to look at our district data, and then we need to think about our needs that we need to start addressing going into the next 2 to 3 years. Our big picture is, we're headed in the right direction, but, we got to be prepared for hiccups. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to skim through this, jot down any notes, and then we'll come back together real quick. Okay, so the last week was a huge week for our district. We had 7 propositions that we proposed to the community that we were looking for things to get passed by our constituents, by our community, by our parents, and just wanted to go over those. Did y'all hear any feedback from community about the importance of this bond election, or was it just, it's all about raising taxes, which we're not raising taxes?
A lot of what I heard was members of the community talking about how they want teachers to get paid more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think what I've heard is that the paying of the teachers and the better technology was more important than the athletic facilities that were proposed.
But there was a significant amount of people that actually voted, so, it seems like the community is backing the whole thing.
That's good.
So it wasn't just a tiny portion of the community that voted, so.
And that was our big, excuse me, that was our big push with hiring that outside firm, bondelection.com. We had them bring in, it's terrible. I had them come in, and our goal was to raise our voting percentage from I think we were at 8%. And we had 32% people in our community actually vote that were eligible to vote. The other data point that was huge that we found out is out of the 100% of teachers that are eligible to vote in our district, we had about 75% of them vote. Now we can't see the results of those, but you can say, teachers want to get paid more. I can assume that they voted for Proposition A. Our biggest thing is trying to stay competitive with surrounding districts, because that is huge. And we know that we're facing an uphill battle when another district around us is offering $64,000 for a first year teacher, and we're at 61. That $3,000 makes a difference, and they'll pay those tolls to go to Frisco, Prosper, anywhere that's east of us that is growing like crazy. And then their path of growth professionally is huge, because you can go out there as a teacher, become a lead, become an assistant principal in 5 years, because they are adding schools. And I think in their proposition, they're adding 22 schools in the next 5 years based off of this. They're asking for $1.4 billion in all of their combined propositions. But I do think it's important. So we'll kind of go through the data results real quick. We'll talk about the good ones first. We'll talk about Proposition A. That was our big one. That was our VADER, the voter approval tax rate ratification election. It was approved by almost 70% of our 32,000 voters. The VADER will generate about $37.5 million in funding for student instruction, programs of choice, and extracurricular opportunities. That's something that we put together as a projection. If you guys don't remember, about 6 months ago, we talked about what type of extracurricular opportunities do we need to start thinking about for our students, and what can we push down to the middle schools to allow them to feel more included in other events. And remember, it was 2 board meetings ago, we had swimming as a middle school elective that could be passed as a sport now. So students that more on our Flower Mound and Highland Village side, they're more involved in swimming. But if we can offer that to our students on the Louisville Central East side, it gives those students another opportunity to grow as they get into high school. So I think that was huge. Proposition B was a bond of almost $1 billion, and that was approved by 61.9% of our voters. This is the fund maintenance, repairs, and renovations to our campuses and facilities. The biggest piece that comes out of this is the updating of our safety and security equipment and technology. And as you guys have probably seen from our community, safety is number one. We got to keep our students safe. You have to remember, it was probably 2015, 2014 when we started adding cameras to all of our schools at the level that we have now. I think we went from just general hallway videos to HD cameras, which then included the infrastructure and putting the correct wiring in place. And then now with the upgrade of technology, you got to have the right infrastructure in place. So I think that's huge for us. And in the replacement of the transportation center and the purchase of school buses, as you guys have seen, the impact and the financial impact of having our own school buses, that we don't have to rely on a company to service theirs. We can offer more jobs to individuals to be mechanics. We can offer more opportunities for people to come into our district and work and help serve our students. And then Proposition C, this was the update and purchase instruction for the technology equipment. This is updating our laptops. I know we've had admins who have had laptops for over 10 years, and our district's done a great job to update those and keep them in working condition. And we were running out of our last bond money that was over 10 years ago, because remember, that was used for only a 7-year projection. So we've had admins who have had computers for more than 7 years. And that's important to make sure that we keep things updated and growing. So we'll kind of get into the negatives. Proposition D, this was the maintenance and the renovations for athletic facilities was rejected. Proposition E, the maintenance and renovations for our aquatic center was rejected. And Proposition F, this was the renovation of the 4 football stadiums was rejected. And then the last Proposition G was the construction and the renovation of a multi-purpose indoor athletic facility. These last 4 pertained around athletics and extracurriculars. And I think we will have to eventually find a way to accommodate these groups of individuals, but it's going to take time. Voters are going to have to see that there will not be an increase in taxes because we voted for these. And then what we want to see is if we can come back to the drawing board in about 3 to 5 years on see if we can get more facilities added. And this goes towards the fine arts, this goes to athletics, this goes to extracurricular activities, that if we can add these facilities, then that really helps. So that was just a recap of the bond, and hopefully we can kind of get back, get things rolling again now that we have more money in the bank. So we need to look at our district vision for the next 5 years. Areas of growth, areas of need, and do we want to change our vision? Our vision right now stems around growing individuals to be the best they can and providing them opportunities to grow and be contributing members of society. We added our tech centers about 10 years ago. We've looked at students graduating from those tech centers with certifications in welding, auto being mechanics, barber, and that's really helped them find a path in their life, because we know not every kid is going to go to college, but we want to be able to find a role for them that when they graduate, they have a direction instead of good luck to everybody else. So as you guys have seen, we need to start thinking about what is our vision for the next 5 years? What are areas of need that you guys have started to see within your departments that we need to focus on or address?
I think one of the things that I had a question about, we talked about Prop A and we talked about going into the schools and seeing what kind of programs we could push down, and we talked about swimming.
Yeah.
But is that really still viable with the fact that the aquatic centers and all of those facility upgrades in those last four propositions didn't get passed? Is that something that we need to look at as far as a change in direction, or do we try to figure out a way to still accommodate that
Right.
with with looking at maybe a place in the community that would be willing to lease facilities to us, in the sense that in a way that we can't
Right.
expand the natatorium or whatever. How do we still go in that direction with those bond options not passing?
Well, and in Mr. Platas, what this brings also is, how do we use that for our curriculum for our students in elementary, middle school, that we do have a swim instruction. We do have a piece where we need to, it's part of our TEKS, that we teach them the life skills on how to swim. And we do that in our third, fourth, fifth grade rotations with our elementary schools. And I think that's the importance of it, is that it is important that fifth graders know how to swim. And so from the curriculum instruction side, do you feel like it's important that we continue offering that, or do we need to find different means to offer swimming lessons if we can't upgrade our auditorium or our natatorium?
Well, I guess you look at how you can connect the two.
Yeah.
I know in the high schools,
Yep.
you have pass play. If you want to
Yep.
play in a sport, you have to be passing. You have to be doing well academically. So you can start, if you're bringing sports into the younger grades, you implement that rule as well.
Yeah. I love that. And then we talk about maybe the finances that it has to, Ms. Keller, what I would recommend is you work with your finance team to see the impact of, because that didn't pass, where are we going to have to pull money from to make sure that we have clean water in the pool, that make sure that the pool is taken care of and we can make that last as long as possible. It's like a 10-year-old AC you're buying a used house. You want it to last as long as possible.
Yes.
The other thing that I feel like we need to continue growing is we need to look at our collegiate academies. Our collegiate academy right now, we're partnered with NCTC, and students can take high school classes along with college level classes. And our numbers on that show, we only have 35 participants every year because of space. And what I want to think about is, do we need to look at increasing those opportunities for students? We pay for it. There's a financial component to it. But the Collegiate Academy, a student can graduate from this program and have almost 60 credited hours for them to take anywhere they want to in the state of Texas. The Collegiate Academy is important because it gives opportunities for students that we pay for their 2 years of college while they are at the Colony High School or at Hebron High School.
One question I have about that is, what is the effectiveness now of our AP classes versus our dual credit collegiate academy kind of thing? Are we having more bang for our buck with dual credit classes, or are we having a significant passing rate and attainment of credit through the AP courses? Because they're not guaranteed.
Right.
The kids go and they get the college credit if they do the course and pass the course.
Right.
But if a kid doesn't do well on that exam, they don't get the credit.
Right.
So would it be better to look at expanding the dual credit versus expanding AP?
Right.
So I think that's a concern that
Mr. Platas, I think this is something that you would take back to your team, and then Ms. Keller, you look at the financial components of, and I'm going to have you guys maybe start working together on that and propose a plan. I think because the dual credit, half of that teacher's salary is actually paid by NCTC or TCH, Tarrant County Community College. half of that salary so that a student who's going to 4 classes a day, it is accelerated learning. If they're taking AP classes, that's all produced by our teachers. So I think that's something to definitely look into, is the balance of how that works. I think if you guys can get your departments together and talk to your team about the pros and cons, and that might be something that we need to bring to the table next week or next month, and then start looking at, do we need to spend more time in one direction or the other? And if we need to do that, we need to outweigh or look at the benefits of what this has to offer. I think the Collegiate Academy right now offers the opportunity for students to at least get their associates, versus a student that may not qualify for AP classes because of their grades, maybe can't pass the AP test, and so then they would still have to get their associates after high school. So I think that's important to look at, and I'm going to task you guys to look at that moving forward. That's a great point. So another thing that I would also like to talk about is the discipline of vaping in our district and the impact that it has. We can talk about the societal piece, but vaping in our district has impacted how we discipline our students and in the health concerns that we have. And we do have an alternative school placement for our district that houses about 100 high school kids, 30 middle school kids, and 10 elementary students. In a district of 50,000 students, that's less than 0.5% of all these students. Now, the data that we ran last week and talked about the vaping and THC and nicotine, about 80% of our students in alternative school placement are at this setting. And they're there for 30 or 60 days. We offer Hope services. But is that impacting our students? And so the financial component, Ms. Keller, I'm gonna go to you here in a second, is if a student continuously gets in trouble, we need to look at JJ as an opportunity. But JJ is charging us $300 to $400 a student a day. So if a student is there for 30 days, $300 times 30 is $9,000. That's how much that student cost us. So is it more effective to keep them at our alternative school placement or go up to Denton and they're there at a more punitive corporal punishment setting? And so that's what we need to start looking at.
Well, I think we need to look at how we use the funds depending on the case by case individual student. If it's a repeat offender and they're sitting in class in our alternative program, is it less of an impact to have them continually come back to the alternative program, or hope that JJ would provide some rehabilitation and then them being able to maintain on the campus?
I think where I need you to start pulling data is, if we have a student there for 30 days at $300, that's $9,000. Where is that money going right now? Does it go back into our general fund? Does it go into our student fund? In my mind, people are asking those questions. You know, if last year, if we had 35 students at $9,000, that's $270,000. That's $250,000 that we could be using for instruction, or we could be using for teaching staff. We could be using to hire high quality staff members in central office to help with this planning and programming. And that's going to be important as we talk about, you know, do we need to make teacher cuts moving forward, or where are we looking at our balance?
I think if you look at 50 kids at JJ, that's right off the bat for whatever that length of time is, 30 to 90 days. If it's 30 days, that's $450,000 for 50 students at JJ. Now, we also have the fact that, the state law says if it's nicotine, if it's THC, it doesn't matter. They go to DAP. So that took away that $450,000 that we were spending, but it overloaded us in that DAP facility. So another idea that we might be able to look at is, since we are a district of innovation, we have the opportunity to get waivers and make changes to
Right.
our district policies that allow us to have some leeway in how we follow that
Yeah.
law. So I think, money wise, we could, propose, something on the order of, how we approach that, not necessarily even with the HOPE program or whatever, but there have been districts that said, we're not doing that.
Right.
We are not going to send kids to DAP automatically because they brought a vape to school.
I also think we should dig deeper into collaborating with the DAP program and looking at how many students are taking up seats at DAP because of vape and the persistent misbehavior and,
Right.
and things that are that offenses that are happening on a campus that we're not able to serve those students in the DAP program because of the fact that the seats are being taken by the vape. So I think we need
Yeah.
to look at that too, because I think that's going to have a trickle down effect long term with instruction and things like that.
And what you guys don't see on y'all's side is the appeal process. Is our principals are putting in the discipline, parents are arguing that the THC is not theirs, we are following district protocol. And then what happens is that they appeal the placement. They've complained about the academics at DAEP. So Mr. Platas probably need to start getting with your academic team and discussing what is the best course of action. Right now they're running a program called Edgenuity. And the students log into this program. It coincides with the TEKS expectations, but the district calendar, academic calendar, is different for every student that comes here because they come from different campuses. And so we probably need to look at a precise district calendar that everybody follows at the middle school and high school level. The concern with that I have is when a student who is a lower level academic student, and then you have a higher level, those academic calendars are going to be working at different speeds. Some of those students are going to have more gaps. Some of those students are going to have more areas of growth that they have to accomplish and more areas of need, versus students on another track have the resources at home, have access to technology, have access to books, have access to high level of instruction, and so they're learning at a quicker pace. And so it doesn't matter that a student over here or a student over here winds up at DAEP, because we still have to educate them. But we need to look at what is the best curriculum fit for our campus at alternative school to make sure our students are still being educated and pushed in the right direction. So when they go back to their campus, they're not behind, their grades are still in the right spot, they've earned credit, because parents are going through the appeal process. And before it gets to me, they're discussing this with our director of discipline, and they're saying there's something missing. And then they appeal, and then they come to me. Well, the student has already completed their DAP days, but academically their grade is 10 points lower than when it left. So on the curriculum side, I need you to get with your team and figure out what is the best course of action. We've ran Apex, that's another component. We're running Edgenuity, or do we need to go back to where the sending campus sends that work to the campus?
Yeah, ultimately, students are going to need individualized instruction to an extent. So we need to look at to see if that option is available with those programs, and if not, we may need to talk about having academics sent over to the campus,
Yeah.
and more communication between teachers on those two campuses.
Okay, and that sounds like a good idea.
I think one of the things that the district has to also consider is the fact that we are putting a lot of money into the fact that when I send a kid over to, or when somebody sends a kid over to DAP, what happens is in lots of districts around the state, they are limited to core classes.
Okay.
And core class instruction only in the DAP facility. So if they're taking AP physics, they're not getting that in DAP
Right.
for several things. So we offer that as an option but it is definitely a privilege, and it is something that we don't necessarily want to go backwards, but that is, when we decided to do that, that has been a challenge. And so, you know,
Okay.
the significant number of DAEP placement,
Yeah.
you know, the DAEP facilities in the state do not offer every course imaginable. And I think that with the Edgenuity piece,
Yeah.
we have the licenses for all of those courses, and we're really the only ones. Yeah.
Do we have numbers on that, Miss Keller? Like off the top of your head, if we're spending a couple $1 million on this, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, or I don't.
We're running close to, it's about 900, so we're almost to $1 million at this point.
Wow,
I mean,
okay.
because you're looking at licenses, you're looking at technology surrounding the staff being able to monitor it.
Yeah.
To try to cut costs this year, we took away the MacBook Air from all the paraeducators in the district and gave them iPads to reduce some costs, except the DAP program requires laptops for all staff members so that they can monitor the coursework. So you're looking at licenses, you're looking at technology impact, and also any kind of technology upgrades and things like that as a cost as well.
Well, and hopefully with that Proposition C being passed, where we talk about the technology upgrades, that may give us some latitude in making these decisions with more support on our campus. Mr. Palatas, I do need you to get with your academic team and see what's the best fit for those kiddos. I know it only impacts about 200, but the impact of those 200 may decrease the recidivism rate of those students coming back. I know that we have some counseling programs that we can look at as well, but the big picture is, how do we not make DAP a place that students want to go, but continue their education and where they can get back on campus? Because I'm assuming it's going to affect their GPA. And a lot of these higher level students that are gearing on that GPA to get them into college, they go to DAP. I don't want it to crush them, but I also don't want it to be something that is detrimental to their academic progress. The next thing that kind of takes us into is our iPads versus Chromebooks. What have you guys been hearing from your teams about students using iPads, Chromebooks, the infrastructure, the cost? And about 10 years ago, we as a district, it was decided on we were a 1 to X district where students would have technology in their classroom. And if they were not able to afford a computer, iPad, they could use their cell phone. And then we passed a bond that in 2013 that produced students, every student to have accessibility to an iPad. But that means we had to train our teachers. We had to put things in place in our classroom for infrastructure. So from you guys, where do y'all think we're at with the iPads and Chromebooks?
I think that the iPad continues to be an effective tool in the classroom from the campus walk that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
My own personal child that attends school in the district at an elementary level. I think that Chromebooks limit some tools that the students are able to access.
Okay.
Yeah. I prefer the iPads from what I'm hearing from the teachers.
Okay.
They prefer them as well. They're easier to navigate. They're easier to work with. It's what they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hear a lot of complaints. Not as much as I hear about the Chromebooks.
Yeah, the significant limitations from the Chromebook side, where you can't, download programs. You have to use what's available when you access the internet on the Chromebook. If there's not a internet accessible application, then that Chromebook is kind of limited. So
What do our teachers need? Because if we're giving our students all of this technology and all of this accessibility, what do our teachers need to feel adequately prepared in the classroom?
A lot of what I'm hearing, students are very much distracted by their cell phones in class, and it's keeping them from learning.
Okay. How do we manage that? Because if we got the funds, do we go away from 1 to X? We say you can't use your cell phone, or do we leave that up to the campuses to manage their technology, and we look at our behavioral practices and see do we have adequate behavioral practices in place that if a student uses or misuses technology, they administer discipline. Is that something we want to table and talk to the board about, or is that put as part of our campus behavior management plan?
I think that may be something that should be left to the individual campuses
Okay.
I agree.
as far as how they want to tackle their environment, because you've got some campuses that are technology focused, and I have a lot of teachers that utilize their cell phones in the classroom for instruction. And I know some parents choose not to use the iPad that's allotted to them and use a cell phone instead. But I think that should be something left to the individual principal on their campus.
I mean, or we could, I agree with Dr. Went with that, with the individual, or we could create a focus group. And have 3 different elementary, middle, and high school, and have them kind of come up with ideas.
I like that. How would we go about creating these focus groups? Because our district serves over 650,000 square miles, all the way from 377 all the way to Frisco. That's a lot of area. We have 50,000 students, average 1.5 parents at home. So you're looking, let's say, 100,000 individuals that could be a part of this. What kind of information are we
Well,
Oh,
looking
I was
for?
thinking campus administrators. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Plaza.
We have the zones. And
Yeah.
we start with the zones, and then we have a variety. We're gonna, separate secondary from elementary, because I
Yeah.
think the problems are gonna differentiate there. But Melissa Keller.
Oh, I was thinking the campus administrators.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have them, should we provide them a list of questions that we want to ask, or leave it open-ended and the campuses come up with their own, how this impacts their
Well,
campus?
We have that behavior management framework where
Okay.
each individual campus creates their behavior management plan, and if they wanted to include it in that, then that gives them enough of individuality.
Yeah.
They can look at that and
Okay.
they can speak with the community to those things.
I do think we probably need to give them a framework and say, this is what we're looking for and why. And then take that information and see what comes from that.
I also think it's important that feeder schools collaborate with each other too, because if an elementary to middle to high school all have
Yeah.
different expectations, then it'd be problematic.
So then this takes us into the HR part. Is we had a teacher caught with an OnlyFans page, and it made the news, and we were aware of this and we were ahead of it. And from the HR side to the legal side to the community impact side, we have to talk about the social media violation that this individual had, and we got to look at our procedures and rules. We'll get with our legal team on making sure that that's in writing when we sign contracts. But what do we do with teachers that want to pursue this path that financially we cannot balance? From the HR side, do we fire this teacher? Do we put them on leave? Do we reassign them? Or
Was the teacher identifiable as an LIC student?
Or teacher.
yeah, identified as a teacher. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it came to us. I think
Okay.
it was an anonymous tip from a parent.
Well, I think we have to go back and look at the acceptable use policy of technology and social media that's covered in the employee handbook.
But it wasn't hers. I mean, it wasn't the district's technology. It was her own personal. It was at home. Our tech have already looked into it, pulled all of her stuff. So then you have somebody that's home doing their private thing on a Saturday night, and the impact that it has on the community. And there's been a lot of positive and negative feedback from this. We've already had a couple of letters from parents saying that she needs to get fired and this is unacceptable. But we also have some parents that have said, we really enjoy this teacher, and what she does on her own time is her own thing. So the biggest thing is the impact on our culture and the impact on the community. And we have to take a firm stance and stick with that, because if we are balancing that we can only pay X amount and an individual can go create a social media account and make 2 or 3 times more, is that something that we want to dabble in, or do we just make a firm, if it impacts the community, we fire them or don't renew their contract? And that's my concern.
Well, the state has a piece of that too
Okay.
with their licensing, because if a teacher has a license, they're bound by certain ethical by a certain ethical framework.
Okay.
And so if they're outside of that ethical framework, the state already has something in place for their license. So, if they're within the bounds and within the state encompassing bounds, I don't know that I'm ready to fire that teacher,
Okay.
because if it's not something the state's going to take their license for, then who am I to fire that person when the state would not
So
take
we
their license?
so we need to probably look at
So,
that input from
yeah.
the TEA side.
and we need to make sure that legal framework is satisfactory, because we go to start messing with people's livelihood,
Yeah.
and we're outside the bounds of what TEA is already established, then we might find ourselves in a little bit of hot water there.
Go
I
ahead.
agree with Dr. Nguyen, and from my perspective, if it's not affecting the ability for the teacher to implement appropriate curriculum that sticks in line and instruction, I don't think a course of action is necessary. It's
Okay.
punitive.
But I think we need to loop in Miss Grant. I know she's sick today, our
Mm-hmm.
director of communications, but I think that we need to really look at how not necessarily the community is addressed, but I think there's a piece of it that we need to look at when parents are, contacting administrators and things like that, communications guidance on how we can communication HR together, providing the guidance of a formulated response that shares that information, but also is in a way that aligns with our core beliefs and values as a district.
So right now that teacher's on paid administrative leave. I think through her appeal, we were scheduled to get back with her next week. So I will make sure that we get with our legal side and director of HR, and just to make sure that we have a plan ready to go, because we will have to answer to the board for this, because they will ask questions. And we need to put things in place to make sure that if it happens again, that's our clear stance. What I would like to promote is I get it, but it's the impact that it has on our community and culture, and what are we trying to promote. The other thing that we combat is the accessibility that students have at the elementary, middle school, and high school level, and now they're probably going to be searching for this teacher because of what society has told us. So going into the next piece, and this is a huge topic that I would like to start thinking about in with this bond being passed. This brings up the great point of we need to either look at building a second high school, or we need to look at building a 9th grade center connected to those high schools, to where we can accommodate the growing community, but not have our high schools overlooked or overpacked, overstacked with students, overstacked with not having the space, classrooms, and everything else. The biggest thing is what do we want to do? So this is open for discussion. We will take this to the board in a couple of months once we put everything together. But what is y'all's stance on, do we need to build additional high schools or 9th grade centers that are connected to their high schools?
I think the 9th grade center provides a good bridge between middle school and high school, with some flexibility of you have 9th grade students that need to attend classes on the main campus. So having that flexibility, I think that might reduce some stress and anxiety and avoid that huge jump from middle to high school. I don't know if that solves the long-term problem
Okay.
of the exponential growth we have in the DFW area.
Okay. From the curriculum side, we would have to look at these ninth grade centers offering ninth grade curriculum, and do we have enough supports in place to where if these students who are in ninth grade have already taken ninth grade classes in the eighth grade year?
Yeah, and that's common. And the system that LISD has set up now is that the students are bused to a different campus to access that higher level of academics, or they're provided on campus as well.
Do we have districts around us that have separate ninth grade campuses that we can go to and start tapping into their knowledge?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe Plano.
Yeah.
Plano?
I know the
Okay.
one that comes to
Yeah.
my mind.
Okay.
Now, other districts like Frisco, they just build more schools.
They just build more schools? Well, we're running out of land.
Well,
Or,
I mean, I think going with the build more school piece though is that you end up with a lot of kids in one building,
Mhm.
and then you need additional administrators. So looking at that ninth grade, you can have a smaller campus that focuses on the students, and then move them up.
Now, where is the expansion of students happening? Is it, are we expanding everywhere? And so we've got, feeder schools that are
Right.
bulging at the seams and
yeah.
trying to send all their ninth graders into one school? Or, is it, we just have a random influx of ninth grade kids?
Right.
I think that's what we need to consider. Is it a global thing where, more than one high school will eventually be necessary?
Right.
Or is it something that is, a short-term problem?
Looking at our projections where we're at, we have 50,000 students. We're looking to stay between 45 and 55,000 students for the next 25 years.
Mhm.
One thing that we are unable to project at this time is the growth of Frisco going into the Ponder Prosper area. And the big impact that has is where our boundary lines are, because we can only go so far until it turns into another school district.
Sure.
We can expand this way by another 10, 15,000 students, but we also know that the prices of houses that direction are over $1 million. So even if we build another high school out there, which is great because of the land, do we bus students out there? Or do we just build a smaller campus, have them spread out, and we shift our district lines going that way? That would have to be a community and board approval. And last time we tried to do that at Louisville Harmon, the problem was there was the families across the street that were classified as Flower Mound that voted that they didn't want to go to Louisville Harmon and still wanted to be bused to Flower Mound High School. So instead of walking across the street to a campus, they ended up getting bused over 2.5 miles, and now we got to pay for busing. But then that's us listening to our voters and us listening to our community on what they wanted.
Well, because people buy houses for what schools they feed.
That's
to.
right.
And then you redistrict and rezone them, and they're not happy.
How do we make sure that we're offering the same level of staff and curriculum at one campus as we do on another when they're on separate sides of town?
Well, if you're just talking about that one ninth grade campus, then if it's right next door, it's just a property
Right.
thing. It's not necessarily going to change busing.
Right.
It's just gonna alleviate a bulge in a specific campus, So you put those ninth graders in that building by themselves. Some of them actually go over to the 10th grade campus because they're a little bit ahead or whatever, but that's a walk and not a bus. And we'll,
We probably need to look at our pockets of growth. We need to look at, we do have a school, Downing Middle School, that's in the middle of a community that the community is getting older and they are not moving out of it. So their kids are becoming parents now, and that school that was built for 1,000 students only has 300. So we've turned that school into a storage unit with 300 kids.
Yeah.
And how do we keep away from that? That's the key.
And you end up with surrounding elementary schools that have more students than that middle school.
So that's always a factor too, because we can't control the houses being built, but we can control the buildings that we build. Okay, so going into the board voting and the expectations, the biggest thing that's on the docket right now is that 2% or 3% raise. I would prefer that we give teachers more money. That's what our district survey responded with, is 3% is a lot more than 2%. But the impact that it has on our district is that that's a $20 million pay hit to our overall budget, our operating expenses on top of everything else. Because when we give these types of raises, we look at the insurance that comes with it. We look at the increase of social TRS that we have to pay. The Medicare, Medicaid taxes, that increases as well. And so that's all part of us splitting that with our community. Is this something that we want to take to the board for a vote? Are we ready for this? Are we ready to present on it? Do you think we have enough data for them to go one way or another? Because out of our 7 board members, 2 of them were only thinking about a 2% raise.
Well, the whole purpose of the Vader was to overcome the deficit
Yep.
that the state had
Okay.
in there. So we got that passed. So my question is, was that money amount that we asked for available to cover a 3% raise? If the state had funded us fully, would that
Right.
3% raise have been covered in that in that proposal that the state gives?
Yeah.
And I think if it would have, then it would be easier to lean towards a 3% raise. If it wouldn't have, if it wouldn't have covered it without the need for the Vader at all, then I think we'd lean towards the 2%. That's just my thoughts on that. I mean, I don't have any concrete data on it, but
Okay.
but if
And that makes sense. Proposition A was for that. That eats up $37.5 million of that funding, but we also got some of our golden and silver pennies from that will help cover future expenses. Because we know teachers like a 3% raise.
absolutely, man, they're definitely going to want that.
Okay, so I think we're ready to take that to the board. And then the other thing that we've been working on lately is owning our own bus company. The financial impact that it has, the accessibility to different campuses, the instructional piece that we can send a student to another campus because they offer something that one high school doesn't. I think the financial numbers that came back to me from Ms. Keller and your team was $275 million over 10 years, and the impact that this has. The sustainability is going to be the biggest obstacle, and I think we have enough data to show that it is going to be sustainable over time, but it's the big picture is if we own these, then we own the cost. We can sub out just a company to come in and run it versus hiring a company from Illinois to produce buses that may or may not work. So are you guys ready to take that one to the board also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. District morale, the data that came back to us is showing that district's in a great spot. They're headed in the right direction. Next week, we're going to talk about this information. I want you guys to take this to your teams and discuss with them and see if there's anything that we missed. I do have that ongoing Google Doc that you guys fill out, and then I look at that and review that by Friday to set up our next meeting. And is there anything else that we need to discuss before we start our week? Today's only Monday. Everybody's good? All right, well, I appreciate y'all's time. Thank y'all very much. And let's go change lives.